We can have the best information in the world about what the right diet is, but I think we all know that we don't always eat just because we're hungry. We used to eat to fill a hole in our stomachs. Now I think many of us eat to fill a hole in our hearts. We eat when we're lonely, when we're stressed, when we've had a bad day at work, when we've had a row with our partner, when the kids' bedtime has gone on too long. But often, we turn to sugary snacks, or we turn to food at these points in our day. So I think if we're really going to think about how we can use food to improve our health, we also have to be really honest with ourselves and go, well, actually, sometimes we eat not because we're physically hungry, but because we're emotionally hungry. Now, there was some research done a few years ago that showed almost 80% of us change our eating behavior in response to stress. About 45% of us eat more in response to stress, and about 35% of us eat less in response to stress. I mean, how does that sit with you? What do you think you do? I know for me, if I'm getting too stressed with work life or home life, I crave sugar. So when we talk about added sugar, what are we talking about? Well, I'm talking about sugar that you actually put in a spoon and add to your cooking or add to your tea or add to coffee. I'm not talking about the sugar that's in fruit, for example. It's also when you're buying foods at the supermarket, food products or ready meals, or even, as I mentioned in the previous lesson, chicken breast. Have a look on the back. How many things that you routinely buy from a supermarket already contain sugar? If you've never spent any time looking at ingredient labels, I think you'll be a little bit surprised. And what is the problem with eating too much sugar? Well, there's all kinds of things that happen. Yes, it can affect your teeth. It can affect how much weight you put on. It can cause cravings. It can make you feel tired. And ultimately, too much sugar can lead to conditions like type 2 diabetes. But it's not only the added sugar in our diets that's causing many problems for us. It's also types of food that very quickly elevate our blood sugar. Now, this is really, really common. If it rapidly elevates your blood sugar, you can have a crash 2 to 3 hours later, which can often lead to hunger, tiredness, moodiness, and cravings. Now, one of the types of foods that really cause this rapid rise in our blood sugar are refined grains. Now, these are a mainstay of many people's diets. Now, yes, if you start to unprocess your diet, you will naturally be starting to reduce the amount of refined grains in your diet, which is a really good thing. And you'll probably find that you're craving food less and that your energy and mood is a lot more stable. But if you look at the dietary tribes out there, there's all these different views and dietary camps on what food we should be eating. Low carb, paleo, vegan, whole food, plant-based, whatever it might be. But I will say that one thing they all tend to agree on is that we should be reducing the amount of refined grains in our diet. And one of the main benefits you'll get from doing this is it will get you off that blood sugar roller coaster. Your blood sugar will be a lot more stable and consistent throughout the day, which will make you feel better in the short term and reduce your risk of getting sick in the long term. And I think this is where looking at ingredient labels comes in again. If you don't recognize those ingredients, if you have lots and lots of ingredients in that product, it's unlikely to be that healthy for you. In fact, many breads these days are highly, highly processed. But the truth is, many people, when they actually start to cut out bread, because much of the bread out there is full of refined grains, they start to experience benefits straight away. So if you are someone who likes to eat bread and you do choose to eat bread, I'd really encourage you to try and find a bread that has less than 5 ingredients. So one of the benefits of reducing the amount of processed food in your diet is you'll actually reduce the amount of foods that are giving you these blood sugar spikes and crashes. It's going to help you get off that blood sugar roller coaster. I think it's worth me just quickly mentioning fruit juices, because we hear a lot about fruit being healthy. And of course, fruits contain many helpful compounds within them that can actually be really helpful for our health. But fruit juices are something completely different. In fact, for most of my patients, a recommendation I make is don't drink your calories. Really, if you want to think about your health, most of the fluid you consume should be water, but also you can have a bit of tea, a bit of coffee at the right time for you, as long as they're not negatively impacting your sleep. I think for most people, if most of their fluid was water, tea, and coffee, they'd automatically start to improve their health. So what's the problem with fruit juices? Well, the real problem is that you remove the fiber from the fruit. So just imagine this for a minute. Let's say you like oranges and you had some oranges in front of you. How many oranges could you eat in one go? 1, 2, maybe 3? I mean, I think you'd struggle. You certainly couldn't eat 6 or 7 oranges in a row. I think most of us would really struggle to do that. Yet, in a glass of orange juice, you've probably got 6 or 7 oranges there. You've got all the sugar within that orange without the fiber. And it's that fiber that slows down the digestion of that fruit, which means that when you have the sugar in the fruit, it's not going to give you that really, really high sugar spike because the fiber within it slows it down. When you have fruit juices, you're having all the sugar without the fiber. And so I think for many people, they think they're being healthy with their breakfast or in the evening after work by having a glass of fresh fruit juice. But the truth is, it's added sugar for your body that you simply don't need. I think in the short term, we all know the consequences of not sleeping enough. What's your energy like the morning after you haven't slept? What's your concentration like? What are you craving to eat? Are you craving fruits and vegetables, or are you craving sugary and fatty foods? So darkness is actually a signal to your body that it's time to rest and prepare itself for sleep. But when we expose ourselves to these bright lights in the evening, we basically disrupt that signal. In fact, if you're looking at bright lights in the evening, and the truth is most of the bright light we're exposed to is coming from our screens these days, you're basically sending your body a signal that it's time to be awake. So how can you reduce your light exposure in the evenings? In my own life, literally just 3 months ago, we got dimmer lights put into our bathrooms. Why? Well, many modern bathrooms these days are full of bright LED lights. And I was finding I was doing all the right things. And then you go to brush your teeth before bed, and what happens? You're exposing yourself to all this bright artificial light. So we put a dimmer switch in. So when I go to brush my teeth now, I put the lights right down. Quite a few years ago now, when my kids were little, they really liked having a night light on when they were going to sleep. So we had this white night light. And at that time, I started to read research on blue light and red light, and I learned how red and amber light has very little effect on our body's circadian rhythm. So remember, it only cost me a few pounds, a really cheap red light I bought, and I put in their rooms. It was absolutely incredible. Both of my kids slept for about an hour longer the following day, and that continued for weeks. So simply by not having that white light in their bedroom at night, changing it to red light, that started to improve their own sleep quality. So myself in my own house now, in my bedside lamps, we have very low light amber bulbs. So when I'm reading in bed, last thing at night, the lighting is very dim, it's very warm. And again, it helps that signal, it helps teach the body that now it's rest and relaxation time. Very soon, you're going to be in a deep, relaxing sleep. Now, of course, when it comes to light exposure in the evenings, I've got to mention screens. I know you may like to unwind on your phone or on your laptop. I get it, it's tempting. But for many of us, the act of doing that really is playing havoc with our sleep. Now, what is it that those screens are doing? Well, there's two things really. One is the light exposure. There's quite a bit of evidence now suggesting that if we look at those screens, there's a particular wavelength of light called blue light that goes into our eyes, goes into our bodies, which can affect the release of a really important hormone called melatonin. When you expose yourself to morning light in the morning, you set a countdown of 16 hours after which that melatonin gets released in the evening. It's very important for sleep. But if you're looking at bright screens in the evening, you're actually delaying the release of melatonin, which means you're going to find it harder to fall asleep. And that's why trying to cut out those screens or reduce them a little bit as much as you can make a difference. In fact, the blue wavelength of light, which we get from these devices, in nature, you only see that wavelength pretty much in the morning and early afternoon. You don't see it after sunset. So you think about what message your body is getting when you give it those bright lights in the evening. It's basically getting a signal that it never gets in nature, which is one of the reasons why so many of us struggle to sleep. I myself am a big fan of these blue light blocking glasses. I don't think they're for everyone. And I think, if I'm completely honest and we look at the scientific research, I don't think we have a clear-cut idea yet. But what I can tell you in my own life, and for many of my patients, wearing them in the evening, if you do have to look at screens, can be really, really helpful. So that's something you can think about doing. But I still think the best thing, if we can, is to get off those screens. But it's not just the light. It's also, what are you consuming? Are you getting into an argument on social media? Are you allowing someone's comment to really trigger you, get you upset and worked up? If you are, think about the signals you're sending to your body when you do that. Are you sending your body a signal that it's time to switch off and rest? Or are you actually putting your body in fight or flight, in defense, in stress mode because of that comment? And that's why the truth is, for many of us, we're better off not looking at screens in that immediate period before bed. But as I say, you've got to do what works for you. And one thing that has been really, really helpful is not bringing my phone into my bedroom. I know it sounds simple, but it's so, so effective. So if your smartphone is in another room and you're already in bed, the chances that you're going to get out of bed, walk into the other room and get that phone just to scroll go down dramatically. You could just buy an alarm clock like we used to do. And I know this sounds simple. And here's the funny thing, 20 years ago, you didn't need this advice. Right, 20 years ago, because we didn't have these smartphones, everyone who needed to get up at a set time for work had an alarm clock. It wasn't abnormal, it was what most people did. Whereas now we've got conditioned to the fact that we can't have an alarm clock, it's our smartphone. I can tell you, if you're not sleeping well and you really want to prioritize it, I'd really encourage you to think about it. Can you leave that phone outside of your bedroom? It may be hard at first, you may have to start small, but I promise you, when you do, you'll find all kinds of benefits.